It's June 7th, the perfect day for fear. On this special occasion, just a random day that I picked out, I've got a few stories for you, featuring strange creatures watching you and dark figures haunting up the place. So get your eyes checked and prepare your heart medication. Because what you're seeing out of the corner of your eye in your room at night, it may be more real and tangible than you realize. Remember, if you have a story and you want to hear it on the show, share it with us at reddit.com/r/darknessprevails, or just click the link in the description. Things are speeding up. From X-Own Drajas. For 2.5 years, I've lived in my family's new house. A lot of things have been happening, and now the rate of occurrences is speeding up. At around 4 just this morning, I woke up, rolled over to face the windows, and I began to drift back into sleep, which was pretty easy considering the light rain on the roof. Maybe a minute later, I saw 2 glowing eyes and a vague pale head poke around the edge of my window, looking into my room. For the first time in a long time, I was struck with the kind of fear that paralyzes your entire body, all while your heart sinks into the sole of your shoes. The thing I was seeing at this window was about the size of a 10-year-old child, but its skin was too pale, and its eyes either glowed or reflected the whitish blue light coming in from the next room. It began to snake its head back and forth for a while, and then stared off into the distance, crawling away. After my terror faded, I tried to debunk it, tried to explain away the horror I just witnessed. Maybe it was a bird, but what bird would stand at about 2.5 feet tall? And why would anyone or anything be staring into my window at night, in the pouring rain? A cat, maybe. But again, why in the rain? And what cat would climb onto a first-story roof, walk across a slippery tin roof, and stare into my window soaking wet? Maybe it was some kid playing a prank. But 4 in the morning? I don't think so. And none of that explains the eerie, supernatural glow to it. I should mention here that the day before, while on a hike in the woods, I heard a sudden hush sound in the forest, followed by oddly bipedal-sounding footsteps. I passed it off as a deer or hunter, something like that, even though the sound didn't match the deer part. But now I'm not so sure. Now I'm thinking something may have followed me home. I've had other more explainable things happen recently, but this has me more nervous about sleeping. What if it just stares at me all night? Just watches me. Maybe it even tries to open the windows while I'm unconscious. What if it does open the windows? What if it's been next to me, watching me sleep? What did I see? From JRG962. It was the summer of 2018. I was on a photo shoot for my college. It was a project based at the well-known landmark Iron Bridge Gorge. To give a brief overview, Iron Bridge is located in Shropshire, England. It's famous for both the iconic Iron Bridge, which spans the River Severn, and its proximity to Much Winloch, which is the home to the Winloch Edge and Shropshire Hills. Anyway, I went alone, and it was meant to rain on the same day. After planning to photograph the entire Iron Bridge Gorge from Telford to Much Winloch, I headed down on the numerous buses linking the town with Telford. I happened to run into a huge problem with a part of the shoot. It was also that I mapped out photographing Iron Bridge Power Station, but it had closed in 2015 and was in the process of demolition. As such, I wasn't allowed close enough for photography. I ended up capturing some of it from afar, and then proceeding afterwards to walk up the long-closed Much Winloch branch line. It was a passenger railway which connected Wellington and Telford to Craven Arms near Church Stretton. While the line was closed, it was still partially open as a footpath. I was looking toward the site of the cooling towers at Ironbridge when I noticed on the bridge there was a figure. Now, the bridge has been fenced off for a while now, and I didn't see anyone else on the site that day. But the figure did not look human. That's what really scared me down to my bones. It looked straight at me with white eyes, then lunged at the gates, only to disappear in front of me after giving me a good jump. I ran to the nearest main road. The weather cleared out later, and I began to walk up to Much Winlock. Now, you should know there are two legends of hauntings surrounding this place. The first is a legend about a man named Old Ippican. If you're brave, or foolish enough, to stand on the cliff and taunt the ghost of Old Ippican, the consequences could be fatal. One man challenged the 13th century robber knight with these words, saying, "Ippican, Ippican, keep away with your long chin." And he was never seen again. Ippican was said to be a fierce man of a sour temper and evil looks. Some said he was an ancient magician who had found the secret of renewing life after 70 years. He and his bandits terrorized the locality. No one dared approach his cave for fear of an attack, even though it was rumored to be full of Ippican's booty of treasure and precious stones. Where men feared, however, nature lent a hand in bringing the robber knight his deserved comeuppance. During a raging storm, lightning struck a huge rock overhanging the cave. It toppled down, crashing down across the entrance and trapping Ippican and his band inside. To this day, they still say it's unwise to challenge Ippican, who stalks the edge with his men, pushing the unwary to their deaths over the cliff. Doubters beware. Above Upper Hill Farm lies Ippican's Rock. Look close, and you can see the mark of a gold chain the robber wore, or should we say, still wears. Another story is about a 17th century timbered house. The distinctive facade of Reynolds House in Much Winlock's High Street hides many unexplained phenomena. The fine timbered framed 17th century building has a mid-floor balcony on which children still play, spinning tops. Their faces peer out from the windows. Look closer and you'll see that their faces seem pale and ghostly. The clothes they wear are not of this time either, but Victorian. That's what they say anyway. Now back to me. After making my way to Much Winlock on foot, which took over an hour, I stopped to rest and grab a drink when I noticed on my photos there were strange orbs appearing around the road I'd walked on, but I assumed or hoped it was just dust particles. After finishing up in Much Winlock where nothing happened, I made my way to Winlock Edge, and after reading about the Ippican legend, I decided to try a little paranormal experiment. I said the line as mentioned above to provoke Ippican, though I stayed a safe distance from the edge. But immediately, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to look but saw no one there. I then began to hear footsteps, but surely it was just a hiker or explorer at a holiday camp, which was only half a mile away. But it sounded too close for that. Not to mention there were no cars or signs of people around me. I began to panic, realizing that I may have just provoked an angry spirit, and I prayed that nothing happened to me. I suddenly saw movement in the woodland. It was not an animal. It appeared more like a mist. I quickly grabbed my equipment and beelined to my car. When I made it back, I saw a figure, one that was walking towards me. I put my foot down on the pedal, and I sped away from that eerie scene. 20 miles later, I stopped off at Market Drayton, and I was thankful to be back around people. I was shaking still from what had happened. I went back home after getting something to eat and fueling up. After doing some research into the incidents, I found that apparently there was another legend about a monk that haunted the power station and the nearby abbey ruins. And then I stumbled upon the legend of Ipecac, with whom I did not know about. The taunting I mentioned earlier was not directly at Ipecac, as I'd simply said, "Any ghosts out here really scared to be seen?" I still regret saying it. Sometimes you say something, but you really don't want it. I had no idea that I was risking my life at the time. I'm sharing this story to remind you that legends should probably be respected. The Haunted Library from Silver Bullet 54. Holy Family Academy in Hazleton, Pennsylvania is haunted. I know it sounds strange to say that. You wouldn't expect such a godly place to be a scene of the paranormal, but it is. I first heard the rumors from some of my friends at camp one year. Apparently, back in the 1980s, the school was still Bishop Hafey. A bunch of students from their rivaling school weren't very fond of them. Everything in a rivalry happened: defacing signs and monuments, pouring paint on the football field, eggings, TPing, you name it, they did it. One girl, who I heard was named Samantha, was one of the few students who didn't go with Bishop Hafey's tradition. One night, she had to stay behind in the school to take care of a library issue with the shelving. As she was shelving books, she kept getting a pain in her head. As it was an unusually mild spring, she thought that it could have been her sinuses. When the librarian showed up the next morning, she found the girl lying face down on the library floor. She was dead. When an autopsy was performed, it showed that she had passed from a brain aneurysm. A couple of my friends who attended Hafey said that for a long time after, every time they passed that library, when the lights were off, they saw a pool of strange light in the exact spot where the girl had died. They insisted that Samantha was still there, performing a job that she never got to finish. I was a big paranormal buff at the time, so I thought they were just appealing to my interests. Instead, they were convinced that if they wanted proof, all we would have to do was go to the school after dark. This was 2009. In 2015, 5 years after Hafey was finished and transitioned to Holy Family Elementary, I finally plucked up enough courage to see it for myself. I convinced my then girlfriend Lauren, her cousin Jeff, and my best friend Grant to come along. Grant, Lauren, and Jeff found an open window that was close to the library, so we weren't exactly breaking and entering. It was public property after all. I don't know if that means anything, but after we got to the library door, we used credit cards to mess with the lock and enter. Grant went to the map room. I checked the atlases, while Lauren and Jeff checked the dark shelves in the back. After an ominous 10 minutes, Jeff suddenly began to shout. I ran over to where he was, the two others close behind me. When we got to Jeff, he was trembling, pointing at the floor. We all looked down and saw a circle of light. It was about 1 foot wide and 1.5 feet tall. It wasn't in the air or floating like that, it was just flat on the ground, like a light version of one of those pits in cartoons. I told Jeff to knock it off, that he was just using his flashlight. But he looked at me, showing me empty hands, and said, "Dude, I didn't bring one." Lauren and Grant had their flashlights in their back pocket, and my pin light was in my belt. That's when we saw a spider walking across the floor. It entered this circle of light, and nothing happened to it. I mean nothing. It didn't even cast a shadow. I put my entire arm over it, and my arm didn't even cast a shadow. Lauren even grabbed a book and tried that. Grant laid down in it in a spread eagle position, but nothing we did caused shadows to appear. However, Grant did say that it felt cold to touch. I hesitantly reached down and tried it myself, and he was right. The light was cold. I immediately decided that we should leave, but before we did, Grant said, "There's not even a light fixture here." That was enough for me. We all ran out then. Grant and I looked at each other, then nodded. As I looked back, the circle began to shrink until it disappeared. My guess is that it was Samantha showing us to get attention, telling us that she was there. She's always there. Might always be there. Now I know for sure that HFA is haunted. I hope the students attending now don't encounter it, because if they do, the news will be all over it, and that dead girl will probably never find peace. Oh my God. From Country 1989. This happened in 2009. I've been driving trucks for a while, and the story I'm sharing now takes the cake for all the bizarre things that I've seen. In 2009, I was hauling mostly hopper bottoms, some blood powder, some bone meal, even a few DG-13 corn runs. But every once in a great moon, I'll pull a wagon or livestock trailer. On this occasion, I was hauling a load of late feeder calves for a feedlot out of Indiana. I was going to West Virginia. The destination was a rural farm in Wolfe County. We made it there just fine, me and the mini steak family in the back. After unloading, oddly enough, the farmer asked me to do a big favor. I replied, "What do you got in mind?" He said he's got a couple of dead pigs that need gone. So he asked me to haul them off to a local rendering plant, and to convince me further, he offered a few extra Benjamins for the extra time. I agreed to do it. It was already in the direction I was heading back. Plus, extra money is nice. So he helped me throw the 2 dead pinks in the back. Then I went back on the road. Later in the night, I stopped off the narrow 2-lane road into an old gravel pit. It was one of those old side road gravel lots that state boys throw their toys into while they continue their road to work. By then it was about 11:30 p.m. Me and Gunny, my blue-nosed pit bull, needed some rest, and I needed to work on my logbook first. Where we stopped, for some reason, I got a bad vibe all over my body, and even for Gunny, who was starting to act strange. At the moment, I thought maybe we should head down the road a little bit to see if there was something better, or at least not as weird. But as I was so tired, I reminded myself that I've stayed in worse blocks back in Chicago. Plus, I didn't want to run into any police curious about my logs. So we hopped in the bunk and fell asleep. 2 hours later, I hear a bang and a clank. I fly up, shouting curses. Gunny is perched up tail between his legs, growling but obviously scared. He's showing his teeth. The entire time the truck is rocking back and forth. There's something in the trailer being moved around. I immediately think that someone or something is trying to break into the trailer. Moments later, it all stops. My windows were down at the time to let the breeze in, so I could stay cool without running the truck. I know what you're thinking. Windows down in the spooky woods. What a bad idea. I crawled back up to the driver's seat to check things out. I turned the keys back and proceed to start rolling the windows back up. In this truck, the driver's side window goes up faster, so I watched it go up first, and then I went to the other side to watch it go up even slower. And when I did, Gunny jumped in my lap, barking and showing his teeth again. When I looked over where the window was, there was a face there. There were eyes looking back at me. The thing's head was huge, and its face was like a dog's but twice as large. Its ears were covered in hair, with shagged hair covering its body. Its teeth were absolutely huge too. There was row after row of stained yellow teeth. I saw him pull his head back, then lean into the window. I swear to God the creature smirked at me, then began to growl. Then, with human-like fingers, it started to tap its nail on the glass, the whole time Gunny is going crazy. The animal outside suddenly decides that it's had enough. It turns and walks away slowly. By then, I'm desperately trying to get the truck out of there, to get away from this thing. I turned the headlights on and pulled backward. When I did, I saw how big this thing was. It was at least 8 feet tall, with a body like some bodybuilder. Its fur was all long and mangy and black, with some parts being crimson red, like they were stained from blood. Its legs were all bent backward like a dog's legs, and its tail was bushy like a wolf. Dragging along the ground behind it was one of the dead pigs that I had in the trailer. When I looked more closely, there was another one of those creatures, and it was dragging the other pig behind it. The one in the back housed something fierce. It vibrated the metal of the rig, causing me to shudder, and my dog wet himself. To his defense, my dog was in my lap, so it could have been me that did that. We hightailed it out of there, driving another 45 miles to a different truck stop. I get out to check the trailer. My roll door was halfway bent out. These roll gates are meant to hold cows up to 1,500 pounds, but these things bent it. All I'm saying is this whole thing was unreal. For weeks, then months, then years, I coped with the logic of it all, not understanding it, but still knowing that it really all happened. I've run that same route hundreds of times since, but I'll never stop near that road. 2 months back, I was going through that stretch of highway. They've got a little gas station down there, and one time, before I made it to my destination, my truck was acting up and the engine light came on, so I stopped there for a moment to check if everything was good. I went inside and the clerk said, "Everything good?" All I could say was, "Glad I didn't break down 2 miles back there." I smiled, grabbed a can of Skull, and was off like a dirty shirt. Makes me think, those bumps in the night, they're more than just wind or your house settling. The Shadow That Follows, from Milinda. Whatever this thing is, it won't leave me alone. Let me start from the beginning. It was 4 years ago, and I lived in a small town. It seems almost no one had heard of little Nibley, Utah. I've had strange encounters here my whole life, but this one really scares me. I live on a small half-acre lot with a fence on the home behind mine and to the right of the house, but not to the left. The neighbors to the left had a small part of their backyard barren for gardening, so it was almost always empty. In my yard, right beside the patio, was our playground, and in the back of my yard stood a tall maple tree. My first issue with this creature was when I was 10. My neighbors with the garden had a black cat, and I would play with him from my playground swing set. I would laugh at him and chase him through weeds. Today was one of those days, just playing and having fun, when the cat suddenly froze. His back began to arch, hair standing on end. He was staring towards the garden at my neighbor's house. I looked up at the empty lot, but I didn't see anything. He kept this up for a good minute before returning to normal. Unfortunately, a few weeks after this, they found him on their back porch with a hole in his neck. A few months later, they got 2 new kittens, both of which were black and white. 2 years later, my little sister and I were playing with one of the cats when the same thing happened. It froze, looked at the garden, and hissed. and same as before, it passed away with a mysterious wound. Everything was silent until I turned 14 and we got our own black cat, named Katniss. We'd also gotten our yard fenced in to stop my siblings from playing in the road. I was in the backyard, lying with my cat on my stomach, and she immediately perked up, staring at the neighbor's garden through the fence, before running over to the fence and growling at something. I panicked and followed it, though I know you're not supposed to touch a cat when they're in defensive mode. So I peered over the fence to shoo off whatever may be annoying my cat. This time, I saw it. A shadowy figure devoid of any light, save for its round yellow eyes. It was squatting in the garden and staring at my cat. As soon as it saw me, I couldn't move. Just from the way it looked at me, I knew it was hostile. I scooped up my angry cat and ran to the garage. I kept her locked in there for several days so that she would not get attacked like the others. In fact, I still have her to this day. I'm 17 now. She's healthy and doing well. A few months after that, I forgot about the incident. I had chalked it up to me hallucinating. One day, my sister and I grabbed our sleeping bags and climbed into the playground for a sleepover. Things went smoothly at first, but at some point during the night, I heard a soft, trilling noise that woke me up. When I opened my eyes, I saw those yellow eyes again. They were looking at me from my tree across the yard. I didn't scream, but I didn't look away. Instead, I snuggled up with my sister and stayed awake, even when the eyes disappeared. Fast forward a few months, a few days before my 15th birthday, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. The first few nights it happened, I ignored it, but then I decided to be dumb and peek through the curtains the last time, only to see the creature grinning at me through the window. After that, I began waking up with bruises and scratches all up my legs that would fade away within an hour, and no matter what I did, it wouldn't stop. The only thing that made it stop was when my family moved away in January 2019, but back in May, the bruises came back, and I have no idea how to get rid of it. I'm genuinely terrified for my life. I hope you enjoyed this little assortment of stories. I'm happy that you enjoy the stories even if they're a random assortment. It's allowing me to reach a lot of stories that I couldn't have read otherwise, because finding tales that fit a specific theme can be difficult, if not impossible. So I'm really enjoying this. Have sweet dreams, my creepy fam. Good night. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story you want to share and have told on the channel, share it with us at reddit.com/r/darknessprevails. If you want to support the show, you can go to the links in the description below. I've got a link to my Patreon where you can donate, or a link to my merch store where you can get some creepy cool merchandise. Now then, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous full episode, about 7 true horror stories featuring some of my friends. Kane7ify says, they found Gustav. He's talking about the crocodile that ate people. A very, very big crocodile that was basically a dragon. If you haven't seen the movie Primeval, I highly recommend it. The movie, not the TV show. Jose Chavez says, I'm eating Panda Express. Jose, you're not supposed to eat the restaurant. Nice. Desert Nymph Herbal says, more podcasts, please. I'm addicted. I'll put them out when I can. I can't do every episode on the podcast because I wouldn't make any money, and I'd be homeless pretty fast if that was the case. While I am starting to make some money on the podcast, it just doesn't match YouTube yet. Until then, I will try to put out as many episodes there as possible. Thank you. Rachel Shipton says, hope you really do get better soon. P.S. Love the other readers. Maybe you have tonsillitis. Maybe last time. This time around, they're actually fine, which is freaking bizarre. Instead, what I think happened is some canker sores developed at the back of my throat, which I didn't even know was possible. Hence the insane pain and weird nodes at the back of my throat. And I'm Under Your Bed says, Darkness, can you do some stories from the underworld? Well, you see, I don't think people get out of the underworld, but if they do, I'd be happy to tell their stories. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode, but don't you worry, more are on the way. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're great people. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.